Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third session of our webinar series 2021. Thank you for joining us. Our topic today is teaching listening and speaking skills. I am your host and presenter, George Kanyama. I hold a Bachelor of Education with Special Education and English from the University of Zambia. I've been teaching English for 12 years now, and I'm currently serving as head of department for Choma Secondary School in Southern Province. Outside the school arrangement in Lataz, I am serving as the provincial chairperson, Southern Province. I am also a member of the National Executive Committee in charge of international relations and social media platforms. I sincerely welcome you and thank you for joining us in today's discussion. I hope you follow and take advantage of this presentation to ask questions and comments. As we join, please keep our microphones muted so that everyone is able to hear me. And once the time for questions and contributions come, you will be asked to just unmute yourself or raise your hand, and then you speak so that you share your thoughts. All right, let's begin. So we begin this way. We all know that as a country, Zambia, English is our official medium of instruction and communication. And so there is need that we understand the spoken part of English. We have dealt with the written aspect, especially in the previous presentation with Chief Lazarus Sinkala. And today we focus on the speaking and listening part. We have 4 major skills that complete the communication process and that we need to impart in our learners. That is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So listening is the first skill that a human being learning a particular language needs or acquires. This, although does not apply to those that use sign language, those with listening challenges. However, in our regular schools, it is important that our learners learn the listening skill, because it's important to learn to listen before one learns to speak. Later on, we move to reading and writing. Now, our curriculum provides general outcomes for listening and speaking. Our curriculum intends to produce a learner who can communicate effectively and appropriately in English in various social contexts. A learner who should understand and speak English at an acceptable international standard, and one who should recognize and apply the difference between spoken and written English. A learner who should also understand and speak English well enough to function effectively later in tertiary school and even in the world of work. Now, when it comes to competences expected of learners, they should be able to express feelings, thoughts, experiences, convictions clearly and effectively in speech using English. They should be able to comprehend what has been spoken in English language without misplacing meaning. They should listen and speak in English language completely and competently and effectively in various situations, both in and out of school. And they should listen in English appropriately and effectively in various social contexts. They should also apply listening and speaking skills in a variety of situations well enough to function effectively. So now let's move to these two different aspects. So we have listening and speaking later. So we are going to deal with the listening first, then we'll move to speaking. As a matter of definition, definitions are wide and many, but to focus on listening as the ability to accurately receive, interpret messages in the communication process. It involves identifying sounds of speech, processing them into words and sentences. Now, the listening process involves 5 stages. The receiving, that is the use of ears mostly to receive the message. And then there is decoding or understanding. So interpreting the message and then recalling it or remembering it, and then evaluating which pieces of the information one is to respond to, and thereafter give feedback in form of gestures or even spoken language to respond to the stimulus or to the speaker. Okay, now why should we teach listening skills? Number one, the listening skill opens opportunities for learning and personal growth. Most of us have acquired knowledge and certain skills by listening to some people explain to us, or even when they were explaining to others. It helps also in our personal growth. Listening improves our ability to think critically. One of the main skills, even at personal level, is listening. We need to learn to listen. Someone joked that the Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we should listen more and speak less. It helps also to build relationships and exchange ideas. If you do not listen to others, it's impossible to get along with them or share meaningful relationships with them, because you have to listen to them in order for you to exchange ideas with them, unless you want only your ideas to ride over them. It also helps to avoid misunderstandings. When you listen carefully to what somebody has said, you will understand clearly what they are trying to say. And so it helps us to avoid being misunderstood or misunderstanding others. Listening also helps to develop empathy and compassion. When you listen to others, we are able to empathize with them and show compassion. Now, factors that are associated with listening skills. Number one, pronunciation. For those of us that teach junior secondary school level, pronunciation is important, because when learners pick, what learners mostly pick, either from us as teachers mostly, and from parents, and from television, actually the pronunciation of particular words will affect how people will decode the message. The stress, word stress that is. Learners need to be taught how to identify stressed and unstressed syllables. that will also help them decode or encode a message that they receive from the speaker. Intonation. This is critical because how one sounds when saying one thing is going to relay the emotions, the rhythm, the beat of the speech helps also in the listener to get the correct message. Now, here are some of the techniques. Parents normally teach their children the first language in terms of speaking, and they do it involuntarily without realizing it. But some of the techniques that they use, number one is highlighting. So they draw attention to the word or behavior by indicating and emphasizing it. Number two, modeling. They provide an example for the child to copy. Then they prompt by encouraging him or her to respond, directing the child towards an appropriate response, and then rewarding. So this is rewarding, giving appropriate praise or response that encourages the child. Now, these techniques are important, especially when we are teaching lower grades, that where learners are still acquiring the basic skills of language. In grade 8, especially in secondary schools, when we are teaching listening and speaking, learners have come from various schools, from private schools, some others from public schools, where the use of English was at variant levels and skill. And so when they come, they pick, you use these skills or these techniques, they can help them a great deal in assimilating the skills that we intended to impart in them. Some steps. Now, the first step, there's what we call interaction or modifications of language. When we receive learners from various schools, during our interactions, you will realize that there is a variance that may sometimes lead to communication breakdown or misunderstanding. So, in the first step, when we realize there are interaction or modifications of language that need to be made, let's use repetitions. For example, if a child says, Mamba has got my pen, if it is correct and there is no distortion, then we repeat. And then we have the comprehension checks. As you are speaking as a teacher, you ask the learners if they have understood what you're trying to say, even an individual child. Then also we use clarification or requests. If someone said something that a child did not understand, we help them by seeking clarity from the speaker. What did you say? Pardon, please repeat what you said, and so on. Then in the second step, we asked students to demonstrate listening by predicting the end of a story. I think that is there. We have completing stories in grade 8 or so, some textbooks, but mostly it's completing written stories. We can ask learners to complete a story that you begin telling them a story, and if they listen very carefully, you ask them to listen very carefully if they understand the story, they should be able to find some sort of conclusion to it. Then encourage students or learners to listen for unfamiliar words and raise their hands to ask for definitions to increase their comprehension. If you are teaching, for example, listening comprehension, you ask learners to pay particular attention to words that you may use in the story you're reading that may be unfamiliar to them, so that they can improve. And then we have, if you have recordings, if you have these digital gadgets, it could be, nowadays you can carry it on a flash and play for the children, but this is not accessible to everybody. Sometimes we can have recordings on our phones, at least phones. We can use phones, most of us have, and most phones have recordings. And so you can play a recording, a tape recording of a student's song. It could be a student's poem or anything that has some useful vocabulary that you wish them to learn through listening. And then ask the learners on the song after it has played to test their listening skills. And then you can also play listening games. Someone says something, and then another person reports that, Simon says he is going to see his grandmother next holiday. Oh, Betha says. So they make those exchanges. It's good practice for them. Now, some suggestions. When we prepare listening materials, these should be based on a wide range of authentic texts or situations. They can have both monologue or even dialogue. We also can use, we should try to use the schema building techniques. These involve things like a drawing a process or a development of some a storyline or something like that, so that we help to sequence the information that they are going to listen to. And then the strategies for effective listening should be incorporated into all the materials that we want to use. Then learners should be given opportunities to progressively structure their listening by listening to a text several times and by working through it. Now, the aspect of listening to texts or recordings, the amount or the length of the time that they will be subjected to it may vary. For those at the beginning level of acquiring these skills, they can take longer, or they can even listen to it more times than those that are higher. For example, the grade 10s may need to listen to the text more than twice, whereas the grade 10s, 12s going up, maybe twice would be enough. Learners should know what they're listening for and why. So every time you ask learners to listen, whether to you reading something for them or to a recording or something like that, let them know why. Why are they listening to it? Let's include tasks. that should have opportunities for learners to play an active role in their own learning. If they are to listen to anything, after they have listened, ensure that everyone has a way of participating. This is difficult considering that most of our classes are very large in our schools. And so it has to take creativity of a teacher to ensure that participation of everyone is guaranteed. Okay, now we move to speaking. Now, speaking is simply the process of building and sharing meaning through the use of verbal or non-verbal symbols in a variety of contexts. So when we talk about non-verbal symbols, this mostly applies to sign language and facial expressions. It is an interactive process of constructing meaning. So it involves producing, receiving, processing of information. So that is speaking. Now, what is teaching? Speaking. This is a process aimed at producing English speech sounds and sound patterns, the use of word and sentence stress, intonation, and the rhythm. Select appropriate words and sentences according to the audience, situation, and subject matter, and also a process that help to organize or use language as a means of expressing values and judgment, to organize our thoughts in a meaningful and logical sequence, and the use of language quickly and confidently. So this is teaching speaking in a nutshell. How do we teach speaking? We have two parts: the communicative language teaching, and then we have the collaborative learning. So communicative, this one involves real life situations. For example, at the market, you ask learners, you are at the market, you are the marketeer, this one is a customer. Now, you customer, you have come to buy something. So, and the marketeer, you are selling a variety of items. So let's start a market conversation. That's a real life situation. You are at the bus stop. You would like to find out what time the bus going to your destination is going and how much it is. And so this one is a bus attendant or the ticket seller. You are the passenger or the passenger to be. So let's discuss. Let's start. So those are real life situations. And then we have the collaborative learning. This is where now working in pairs or in groups. The marketeer can handle 2-3 customers. That brings into collaborative learning. And then there is any other situation, or in an office, people have come looking for jobs. The employer can handle 2, 3, 4, 5 people. That's in a group. And each one with specific needs. So when teaching speaking skills, we have these skills popping up again. So we have receptive skills. These mostly have to do with listening and reading. Listening and reading are receptive skills. These are the ones that help us receive information. And then the productive skills are speaking and writing. When we speak, we produce messages that convey meaning to others, the same as writing, using different, except they use different media. And so listening and speaking involve oral communication. These are oral communication, whereas reading and writing written communication. The many problems that we encounter with oral communication skills. Number one, the syllabus requirements. Some of us, maybe we rely so much on textbooks, we may not read through the syllabus so much, but we need to check because these have the potential to cause problems. If you remember, those that wrote grade 9 in the 1990s, when we still had those Cambridge papers, we still had as a syllabus requirement that he needed the examination of in oral, the oral paper, the discussion paper. The British still do it. If you write the IELTS or the International English Language Test, they still test you using the listening skill test. And then we have the language and the speech. Well, this is a potential problem. Then we have the physiological and linguistic characteristics of speech and the ways of creating situations. And then prepared and unprepared inner speech and types of exercises. So all these, they are potential problems that we will encounter in a class. So let's look at the physiological aspect or psychological aspects or characteristics of speech. Number one, speech must be motivated. There are people who are naturally quiet, but everyone somehow is motivated to talk. In a classroom situation, some learners may decide to keep quiet throughout. So they need to be motivated to speak. And then speech is always addressed to an interlocutor. There is another person to receive the speech who should respond to it. Then speech is always emotionally colored. It has intonation that depicts the emotional attachment or sentiment attached to the message. And then we have speech is always situational. We speak according to a particular situation. And so learners must be provided with these situations. Then the linguistic characteristics of dialogue or in speech. Number one, we have the use of complete sentences or ellipses in response. For example, where do you live? Someone just says, where do you live? This is, instead of someone says, I live in Choma, they just say in Choma. So this is still okay. How many books do you have? Instead of replying, I have one book, someone would simply say one. And then we have the use of contracted forms. Doesn't, won't, haven't, and so on. These, if you ask in composition writing, they have different other requirements. Then the use of some abbreviations like lab, bag, bike, fridge, comp, and so on. These are common in dialogue and in speech. And then the use of conversational tags. Conversational tags. So we have then prepared versus unprepared speech. Prepared speech, you speak following a particular plan. But when it is unprepared, you speak just on a suggested subject. That is one that is suggested by the teacher. You speak on the text or that you have read or summarize or give content of it. Then you discuss problems. touched upon in the text read, or that what you have heard, and then you help a foreigner, for example, each find their way to some place. So all these are possible suggested topics or subjects that learners can speak about. But this is where speech is not prepared. It's unprepared speech. So we can use unprepared speech where learners are given these suggested topics just to enable them to say something. Okay. Then types of classroom speaking performance. We have imitative, intensive, responsive, transactional, that is dialogue, and interpersonal dialogue. Let's look at the imitative type. So the imitative type, when they are to imitate, when you are asking learners to speak using the imitations, you must keep them short, okay? The imitations should be short, and you keep them simple, preferably just one point at a time. Then make sure students know why they are doing the drill. Then you limit them to phonology or grammar points, and then you make sure they ultimately lead to communicative goals. Just don't overuse them. The responsive type, this is where you ask learners to respond to questions that they are asked. How are you today? Then someone, pretty good, thanks. And you? So these are simple answers to questions. You can use the responsive aspect or the responsive type of drill. Transactional, this is where people now engage in dialogue. What is the main idea in this essay? So after they have read through something, you solicit for answers that are open-ended. They could, but you solicit, it's in the transactional format, you solicit responses. Then we go to the interpersonal dialogue. This one is simply usually a conversation. It's conversational and mostly unstructured. It's casual. They can use casual register of English. They can use the colloquial language, and they can be emotionally charged. They can even use slang and ellipsis in this particular approach. So now we have monologue and dialogue as the main forms of speaking. When we are teaching monologue, we have some levels. There are 3 stages. The first one is the statement level. So this is where statements are given. So number 1, you can have substitution. So I have a book. Then someone can say I have a pen. The other one says I have a ruler. The other one says I have a bag, and so on. Just substitution. Then we have the extension statement. I have an interesting book. I have an interesting book. Instead of just saying I have a book, they add another word that extends the statement. I have an interesting book. And then transformation. This is, he has a book, he has no book. This is where you use the negative and the positive. Then we have completion. If I have time, I will. So each one says what they will do if they have the time. This is the completion. The next level is called the utterance level. Here, for example, teacher says she cut her finger. Who cut her finger? So you utter something that evokes a question in the next in the learners, and it continues until it becomes some sort of conversation. At the end, you can have a summary of the whole conversation in form of one utterance. Yesterday, Anne cut her finger. She cut it with a knife, and the knife was sharp. So, and then we have the discourse level. So here, pupils are asked to speak on a picture or a film, anything that has stimulated them. They comment on a text they have read or heard, and then make up a story of their own. So the teacher supplies the pupils with what is to speak about. For example, the farmer's treasure, and so on. When it comes to dialogue, we have the first level of a conversation between two interlocutors. Then it is always situational and emotionally colored. Dialogue is mostly unprepared. You start a story we started a chat with someone without having to plan what to say. It's one statement leading to the next. And then we have 3 stages in teaching dialogue. We have the receptive, the reproduction, and we have the constructive or creative. So the first step, we have question to response, where a child can ask a question and expect a response from another. Or the teacher can ask a question, the learners respond, and the questions can vary from one child to the next. When did you visit your dentist? Or last week? And then we have statement to question. So if someone says we are going to travel to Crimea, or we are going to travel to Lusaka or Pichpata, so then someone asks, what kind of transport will you choose? So instead, from a statement, it can move to another person, the statement that evokes a question in the next person. Then we have a statement to statement kind of dialogue. I would like to go to the cinema on Saturday. Then someone said, well, I advise you visit the cinema on Monday or Tuesday, probably because there are latest movies on that day. Now, these are just examples. They may not be cinema and traveling by plane or what. They may not be applicable in every context. Learners differ in terms of exposure. Then you can have question to question. This is, can I help you? How can I get to the supermarket or to the chemist? Okay, then when organizing communicative activities, we can use picture. For example, we use picture difference tasks, or group planning tasks, or listening sequencing tasks. Then we can have a pyramid discussion, role models, simulations, or brainstorming. All these are activities that learners can use. Picture difference tasks. You show them different pictures and ask each one to say what they think is different between the 2 pictures, and or among the 3 or 4 pictures, depending on the number of pictures that the learners have been exposed to. So in that conversation, there will be, each one will say, okay, and you can prompt, you give them vocabulary to use as a comparison, a comparative vocabulary that they can use. Then you can also use group planning activities. You give them a task, then as a group, you need to plan on how to do it. And then you list sequencing tasks. What are they going to do from here, when, and then you teach them sequencing vocabulary prior to the activity. Pyramid discussion, this one which comes from, it has a lot and then it becomes smaller as it goes up. They can also use role playing. Then even simulations, interview simulations, or marketeer situation where they simulate a market situation. They can use brainstorming, where this one brings in an idea and the other one brings an idea. It can also use story completion as a drill. So now, here are the suggestions, so just suggestions for teachers. One, we should provide maximum opportunity to students to speak. When you are teaching listening and speaking, there is a temptation for us teachers. We are gifted at speaking, and so we get carried away. But if you are teaching listening and speaking, give learners the maximum opportunity to explore and speak. While you take the facilitator role. You are the prompter of the speech. You say few words just to prompt the discussion, then try to involve each student in every speaking activity. This is a daunting task, considering the size of our classes, but let's try to involve each student in every speaking activity so that we are sure that learning takes place in almost every child. Then reduce teacher speaking. I've already said something about this. Then indicate positive signs. You can either raise your thumb or smile, something to indicate that there's something positive the children or the learners are doing. Involve speaking activities not only in class, but also out of class. Okay, so they do activities. Now, the temptation we have is that in some schools, we speak to the learners in English when we are speaking in class. But once we are out of class, we switch. And so they take the speaking lesson as if it was just a classroom activity, which has no value outside. So we can try to bring them to this situation by ensuring that the speaking activity that they did in class actually has a value outside it. Then circulate around the classroom as we are teaching to ensure that students are on the right track. Yeah, some of us are, especially if a class has in the classroom, there's a chair and a table for the teacher. A good number of us are tempted to just sit there in front and let everything play for the learners. Let's provide vocabulary beforehand and diagnose problems. So before we start speaking or the speaking activities, let's provide the learners with vocabulary that we feel they should use. If it's comparatives, if it is sequencing or tenor phrase, whatever we would like to teach. So let's provide the vocabulary, the words that we expect them to use in their discussion or in their speaking activities. Okay, so these are just the activities now in their detail. The discussion, for example, so we have 4 of them. discussion, debates, speeches, and role plays. So, and when you are to use discussion, if the learners, you are leading the discussion, so you introduce the topic, provide guidance, and then pair or group the children in any way that you feel according to the situation in the classroom. And then each learner must be given a responsibility, specific responsibility, so that there is no overstepping or overlapping of responsibilities. Let the learners have specific responsibilities in the discussion. And then they need to be clear about what they are supposed to do, why, and at the end of the day, what is the outcome. When you are using the debate activity, set the topic, but let's try to ensure, usually controversial topics evoke a lot of speaking from the learners. We have to be careful, of course, but we have academic, it's an academic environment. So usually a controversial topic gets a lot of them aroused to speak, and this could be good. Then you divide them into two groups. Use the random selection method. You can draw some lots, cut papers, put in a box. So this will be all those that want to, we have two groups. So if there are 25 of them, you put, if there are 24 learners in a class, you put 12 written A, 12 written B. And so each one picks. Whoever picks B will be on team B. Picks A will be in team A. And then when it comes to pros and cons, so the for and against, even that there, you don't impose that no, group B is going to, you are going to, as group B, you must oppose, and then group A is going to propose. You toss again, draw another raffle or a lot. You proposing and opposing. Then you shuffle someone from A and another from B, pick, and then it shows who should be the one. When it comes to speeches, like I said earlier, we have prepared the speech and the unprepared or impromptu speech. If the speech is prepared, the topic for the speech should vary depending on the level of the student. As a teacher, you can provide the structure of the speech. It could be narration, description, or anything, something that you want them to, for example, if you're asking, they should tell us an unforgettable experience. This is a narration. So that's a structured speech. You want them to narrate what happened. If it's something persuasive, even that you provide the guidance, and then they speak. So they go and they speak without having to read a paper or something. Then an impromptu speech, this one, you give students more practice, for example, but focus on them so that they think and they speak without a note or something. They must speak an impromptu speech. I remember when ZNBC TV debate for learners, when they reached a certain stage, they would just be told to go behind the scenes for 4-5 minutes or so, prepare you, and you come and argue. Then give them random topics to choose from. If you're using role play, you must always make sure that there is reality of function. So the students must not think of themselves as students, but as real participants in that situation. If you ask them, you are a player, this one is the coach. So they should feel the reality of that function they are supposed to play. the coach must fill the role of a coach and act as they should stop thinking at themselves as pupils at that time. A simulated environment. So the teacher says that the classroom is an airport. So if they are at the airport or they are at the bus stop, so you say this classroom is we are now at the bus stop. So Mr. Customer or traveler, you have arrived at the bus stop and you have found this gentleman here who is in charge of tickets. So the classroom becomes a simulated environment. And then the structure, students must see how the activity is constructed, and then they must be given the necessary information to carry out the simulation effectively. So you tell them, okay, you are the conductor, this one is the what, so this is what you are going to do. You have gone to the station to buy a ticket, and this one is the one selling tickets, or you have found 2 or 3 that are fighting over you. What do you do? And they should, some of those experiences they may have encountered them, especially those that go to boarding schools. So in conclusion, the teaching of speaking and listening is very important part of language learning. The ability to communicate clearly and effectively contributes to the success of a learner in school and even in at a later phase in life. It could be at university or in the world of work. So the students are made active in the learning process, and at the same time, it makes their learning more meaningful and fun for them. If they are to enjoy learning, let's involve and teach them the listening and the speaking skills more effectively so that they have fun. The other aspects of the English language involve us, teachers, speaking, while we turn our learners into pure listeners, some of them passive listeners for that matter. But if we engage we emphasize and teach listening and speaking in our classrooms, we will have learners that will enjoy learning not only English subject, the English language, even other subjects as well. They will find the confidence to learn and participate in the learning of other various subjects in the school. So thank you for listening. This is where I end. I will now invite questions or comments, contributions. Welcome. If you wish to contribute or ask a question, just raise your hand. Or if you cannot raise your hand, you can just begin speaking. Just unmute yourself and then speak. Okay. Alice Wimba, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanyama, for such an informative presentation, and your systematic in approach. I was able to follow throughout the presentation. My contribution is, it seems this aspect of teaching language is not so much emphasized as reading and writing. You find that in most government schools, vernacular language is much more pronounced as opposed to the official language, which is the English language. As the consequence of this, we have candidates failing to express themselves fluently when it comes to writing. So I was wondering how we can really help the situation, because in my time, I remember we were examined in the spoken language at grade 9, topics were given. And this compelled our teachers to be teaching us, even emphasizing the fact that we needed to be speaking English even outside the classroom. Now I'm wondering if we are to go back to the situation when we had candidates in grade 8, 9 speaking the language, then even the performance in the English language was much better, unlike this time around. Of course, I know there are issues of policy where we have automatic progression at grade 7. Then at grade 9 also, we are told a candidate can qualify to grade 10 even without English. Now I'm just thinking outside the box how we, coupled with the ECZ, can help this situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam. That is a very, a very critical contribution, and also a question that probably we need to begin entertaining in our minds, even as language teachers. Where did the speaking tests go? Chief, I can see your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks. It's just a follow-up to, I don't know, the previous speaker. Indeed, there used to be listening and speaking, oral and oral. The question she has asked is very cardinal. She says, where have we gone wrong? Because now just contributed to the progression to them. What we should be preoccupied with is the how. Okay, maybe historically, and just to remind ourselves, oral and oral were abandoned because of, one, the levels of cheating that were so evident. We used to have, including ourselves that underwent that, we used to have situations where a learner in the oral exam, which was examined right there at the school, a learner gets 8 or 9 out of 10. And when it goes to the theory papers, a learner gets almost 0 in all the papers. The question was, how did this learner get 8 out of 10 in speaking? Now, the problem was with the examiners, the teachers, the people who were testing. I remember in my case, sorry to bore you, I remember in my case where we are the 5 and the 2 teachers examining, and this we are speaking, and this teacher points at Helena and says, you haven't said anything. And this person says, oh, actually, what this one said is very correct. That's what I wanted to say. And the teacher gives you the marks. Yeah, so that prompted ECZ to abandon that exam because there were levels of cheating and it was not consistent with what was on the ground. The question we should ask ourselves and find a solution ourselves, who are practicing teachers, is how can we adequately test oral and oral? Other than the method that was used, we have identified the challenges that were there. How can we mitigate these challenges? If we can come up with the practical solutions, I'm sure it wouldn't be very difficult for us to quote ECZ and bring it back on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief, for that valuable contribution. I'm sure Madam Alice has got the background Indeed, we need to interrogate this matter further. If we were culprits of cheating as teachers, then the onus is on us to bring tangible and practical solutions to the problem if we have to. Okay, thank you. Any other contribution or question? Hello. Doc, you are welcome. You have unmuted yourself. I don't know if you were able to follow us or you have just joined.
I followed briefly.
Okay.
And I, of course, I've missed part of it. I only hope that you have recorded this presentation.
The recording is still running. Okay, so there was a comment from Madam Alice Bimba, which Chief was responding to. As
I've gotten that one. I've picked it. I've seen it. I've heard it.
All right.
The response from Chief.
Okay. Okay, Mrs. Tembo, I've seen your hand. Please unmute yourself and go ahead. Madam Rita, you have your hand up. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and make your contribution or ask your question. You have muted yourself again.
Mr. Kanyama, kindly unmute her.
Unfortunately, I cannot unmute her. I can only ask her to unmute herself.
Okay.
So that's the only provision that's there.
Have I?
Oh,
Have I?
finally. Yes, now you can go ahead.
I think mine was an addition to the same
Carry on,
question,
please.
to Chief's contribution.
Yes.
I was saying, I think this is the right time that we can also request for assessments pertaining to the test assessments pertaining to the question that she has asked. Are you able to get me?
Please, we are.
Are you
Carry on.
getting me? Yes. Because if teachers are well vested with the same testing of speech through oral, I think it can work out. Maybe if there can be swapping of teachers this time around, instead of using the teachers in schools, maybe it can work out and it can help. That's my contribution.
Thank you. Anybody who teaches French in here? Because I hear they still do the oral and oral exam. How do they do it? Do they send examiners from a different school to go and assess?
The host.
Please, yes, Doc.
Yeah, when we are teaching extensive reading, that material of oral and oral are still in our schools. That is where I usually bring out such type of teachers, such my pupil. That material is still there in school. And some of us were taught how to use it. I still use it, though I'm no longer as active a teacher as before. I can even demonstrate if given chance, I have material. Thank you.
Okay, we might just take you on that offer. Thank you, Doc. Chief.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Varita, as well as Doc. You see, the problem for now is not about teaching. The problem is about what has made us practicing teachers not concentrate on that aspect. We have not concentrated on that aspect because it's about results. And as long as an aspect is not tested, is not examined, believe me, it becomes very difficult for me as a teacher to go in class, where is still an exam class, grade 9, and start teaching that which I know will not come, it will not be tested and will not add to my results. Because emphasis in the country right now is just about producing results, using academic results. So what we need to address in my view is that we need to come up with practical ways of testing oral and oral, okay? Befitting ways of testing oral and oral so that we can now engage ECZ and say we are ready. This is the roadmap that we are going to use. Host pursued the French, our French teaching colleagues. They do it, and they do it on a one-to-one, okay? They do it on a one-to-one where this external examiner has come, doesn't know these pupils, whether he knows them or he or she knows them or not. But the thing is, they will sit and there is the, I think they are, I've observed the way they do it very neatly and very practical so that the examiner will indeed assess and will be accountable in an event, you know, there are suspicions of malpractice. So maybe if we approach it and come up with such approaches, practical and workable approaches, then we can quote ECZ and pursue that we are ready as teachers of English language. Now, we should also try to distinguish French, Portuguese, Chinese. These are optional subjects. They're not compulsory subjects in our school system. So it would be very easy to administer such an exam to such. But when you talk of English, which is a compulsory, it may become extremely difficult to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. I think with the school-based assessment now that ECZ is implementing in all subjects, the sciences, the design and technology, and all practical subjects, the food and nutrition and home economics. Now we have a scenario where all these, the practical aspects of them that were examined by ECZ in a timetabled manner before and have now been turned into school-based assessments. So how do we practically provide feedback and recommendations to ECZ? It's something that has struck. Well, personally, I'll try to research and see what we can do to submit to ECZ, but it's something that really is worth considering. Any other contribution? Any other contribution or question from the audience? Chief, you can carry on. Chief Sinkala, your hand is up. Please go on.
Yes, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I was saying, I just wanted to commend you. This is a wonderful presentation. Personally, I've learned a lot, and I've reminded myself of a lot of things and gaps that I've been doing as a practicing teacher. Notwithstanding, I would also want to register through your office. I know it's a provincial office, but since at national, due to COVID, we seem to be inactive. I would want to register that as Lataz, can we revamp the idea of what were they called? Lataz newsletters or magazines, something like that, where we can be publishing these as lessons to equip ourselves as teachers. I don't think, actually, I think every teacher of language would want to buy at the end of it. We can make them quarterly, for instance, where we publish these presentations. We publish them in form of lessons and in form of explanations, and we sell. It will serve two purposes. One, and above all, it will equip a lot of us and everyone that are missing out. Not everyone is attending these presentations. It will equip, and we will keep sharpening ourselves up. Two, it will be a financial resource for Lataz, so that we can even go ahead and pay for Zoom like we are doing now. We don't know who's funding it, but indeed, I would want to suggest that we establish a Lataz, is it a magazine? Or yeah, where we publish these. And Southern, you are already showing the way. You can pioneer this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief, for that recommendation. I think in my office, I have found there are some newsletters for Lataz. Those old days, I found some. I think the idea is very, very good and very welcome. We'll see how we can explore that with colleagues. Thank you so much. Okay, any other contribution or question from the audience? All right, it seems we have exhausted the contributions and questions. I'd like to thank you all for your participation, for your attendance. Please invite, let's share with our friends. When you receive the link, share with friends and ask them to join. This forum is for every teacher anywhere you are found in Zambia. We are just leading the role, but we have this platform for every teacher of language. We'll try to bring as many topics as possible that are pertinent to our theory and practice. Would like to thank you, but before I close, Chief Sinkala still has a hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Kanyama. It's just, I think it is prudent that you announce next week's topic.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Next week's topic. Just a moment. Okay. Okay. All right. So next week we are going to look at teaching composition with the figures or statistics with Chief Lazaro Sinkala.
No, that
After that, pardon?
That one is after next week.
After next week.
Is it not Doc? Is it not Doc next Sunday?
Okay. Doc is coming after you, but we can. Doc. Okay, so we will have a presentation from Dr. Monde on analysis of Conge's harvest. Not Conge's harvest, sorry. It's mission to color, I think. Yes, Dr. Monde will give us a text analysis of mission to color. Sorry, I was
Not
reading.
Anyway,
I should do
I think
It's Orange. Okay, I'm reading it wrong. The one which was the draft. Okay, yes, so the doctor will lead us into the text analysis of Oyengi, the new text, the new play for 2022 to 2024 that has replaced Conge's Harvest in the literature in English prescribed books. So let's invite all teachers of literature and all our friends in the teaching of languages to be part of that presentation next week. Dr. Monde, we are going to introduce him when the time comes. Okay. All right. Thank you. But Alex Dakam, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, presenter. I would like to take this opportunity to say a big thank to you and all the people that are facilitating this program, more especially the organizers and many more. Thank you, Chief Lazaro, Doc Monde. I'm late joining it because I was committed with other issues, but I would like Chief Lazaro to share with me the recording if at all is possible. I will really appreciate. Otherwise, thank you very much, and we will keep on sharing the link so that others can learn more. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so this webinar is recorded. We'll share with you the link to the YouTube link where you can watch the recording and the previous recordings as well. Yes, Chief.
sorry, which recording is the speaker asking? Is it last week's recording or this one?
Mr. Daka?
Okay, could Mr. Daka just inbox me on WhatsApp, then we can chat.
Okay.
I think
So
that
if
would
you
be
want,
better.
okay. So if you want the link to the previous recording, the one that Chief Sinkara presented, that one is already in public domain. But if you don't have it, you can still contact me or ask in any of the groups. Someone can share with you. That one is already up and running. This one should be ready tomorrow, the recording, and we'll share the link as well. We have a YouTube channel where we are uploading these. So, because they are heavy to share on WhatsApp, they are quite heavy and they consume a lot of data. So we just share the link to the WhatsApp, to the YouTube channel where you can watch them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please join us again next week. We'll see you with Dr. Monde and Woyengi. Bye-bye. Good night and God bless you. Have a productive week ahead.